There we go. Okay. 2B. Right in the middle. Yeah. So we had this rule in the Mishnah. Zahaklal. This is the general rule that one who on his own does the Avera, meaning he knows the forbidden fat is forbidden. He does it anyways. He can't blame the court. So we this one line yesterday. Just review for a second. Who's this coming to include? Mavet. Mavet is someone who never listens to the ruling of the rabbis. So in this case also, just because they ruled erroneously, he cannot blame them. Rather, he's still going to be liable. So Mavet behora. So now Tola bebezdin. So one who in general doesn't listen to the rabbis, at this point is going to be liable. Tola bebezdin, one who pins it on the bezdin. Who's that coming to include? The suye hora bebezdin, someone who's hora bebezdin, the yadu shato, the chazru behen. So if bezdin made a ruling and he knows that they made a mistake, and then they retracted, so then they're going to be exempt. So says the Gemara, ha behedikatani lo. That already says it explicitly that if somebody makes a mistake and then if bezdin rules and then they retract, that the guy is going to be not now. It's a mission coming up that according to Rabbi Shimon, I think that if bezdin rules and then they retract, the guy is going to be exempt. It says the Gemara, you're right. It is repetitive, but tani hadar umefarish. It taught here like the rule, and then later it's going to explain the rule. So they'll have to wait till 3B. Okay. We're on 2B.
Oh, you're 2B.
Yeah, you with us?
Definitely.
Let's see, I'm Reb Shimon. Oh, yeah, right. Oh, no, where are we? 2B. 2B. Yeah, okay, we did this. Exactly. Pull it. Right here.
Thank you.
Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. So now, our Mishnah that said that a court that ruled erroneously, and now someone goes off that ruling and eats the fat, is going to be exempt from bringing a sin offering. So now, who's that opinion like? I'm Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. Zu divrei Rabbi Yehuda. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Aval Chachamim will say, Yachid she'asa behora, an individual that she'asa behora is bezdin, that goes and acts according to the ruling of bezdin, he's liable. So meaning, if the court rules this forbidden fat is permitted, and I go and I follow their ruling, according to Rabbi Yehuda, I'm going to be exempt. According to the Chachamim, I'm going to be liable. Our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Yehuda. So now, my Rabbi Yehuda, we're now going to try to find where in the Braisos did they mention the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda you're exempt, and the Chachamim that you are liable. So now, says Rabbi Yehuda. So where's Rabbi Yehuda? The Tanya, it says in a Braisa, regarding the section of the Torah that deals with inadvertent offerings, you do something inadvertently, you're generally liable a statrs offering. So im nefesh achas tacheta b'shkaga ba'asosa. So a little bit nitty gritty, but the Rabbi Yehuda learns that there are 3 exclusions in this pasuk. Nefesh achas tachta. It could have been written in a different way, and therefore there are 3 exclusions. And the Gemara other places describes what they're coming to exclude. But for our purposes, so these 3 are going to exclude somebody from bringing a sin offering. However, if one does his own inadvertent avera, he's going to be liable. But beharaz bezdin pater. But if he does it with the ruling of bezdin, then he's going to be exempt. Yeah, I don't know if the Gemara is going to speak it out, but the word techtes, his avera. He only liable when he does it when it's for his avera. So if the court ruled and he does it, then that's going to be an exemption. So that is according to Rabbi Yehuda. Now, we're going to say this later. There's a brisa that doesn't mention the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The brisa is anonymous. We're pinning on Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara is going to ask later, how do you know that there's brisa of Yehuda? It's anonymous. So, okay, fine. So that's Rabbi Yehuda. One anonymous brisa, which right now we're going to assume it's Rabbi Yehuda, even though it doesn't say Rabbi Yehuda, but we'll get back to that later. Mai Rabbanan. Here comes the hard one. Mai Rabbanan. So here comes a brisa, which is going to have a certain setup, which you're going to go back and forth to see what's the most logical way to understand this brisa. So the Tanya says the brisa. Adayin ani omer, I still say that what mi kal shechayavin, that when a minority of the congregation sins, so then chayavin, they themselves have to bring their own sin offerings. She'ein bezdin mevin al yedehen par, because bezdin, when they rule erroneously, they only have to bring they only have to bring an offering when most of the congregation made the mistake. But if only a minority made a mistake, so then bezdin does not need to bring an offering. So basically when bezdin rules, and then it depends who follows them. If a minority follow them, there's one law. If a majority follow them, then they themselves bring an offering. Either they themselves bring an offering, or maybe they themselves and others bring an offering, but they bring an offering to atone for their mistake. That's only if the majority brings. We'll see what it means majority. Maybe it only means people living in Eretz Yisrael. We don't count. We'll see. So for tomorrow, maybe. So this guy likes a lot of Oreos. So yeah. So okay. So once again, the brisa says that a minority of the congregation has to bring their own sacrifice because the bezdin, the court, does not bring one on their behalf. Rov kal shechatu, the majority of the congregation, if they did the aveira shechatu yehei peturin, so then they are going to be exempt from bringing an offering. Shaharei bezdin meviin al yedein par. Bezdin brings for them a bull. So that's one section of the brisa. It sounds like there's a group of people that are exempt, a group that are liable, a group that are exempt, and then it says Talmud lomar me'am haaretz, from the people, some kind of sacrifice from the people, afilu ruba, va'afilu kula, some case where the people have to bring a sacrifice, even when it's the majority of the people or the minority of the people. Okay, so that's a little bit of our cryptic brisa, and now let's figure out what it's saying. So,
since further back, since the court does not bring a bull for a command error of their own account, but if the majority of them, they would be ground wasn't exempting each individual. But they don't. Does he bring a bull or not?
For what?
For the mention here that the court does not bring a
when a minority of the congregation does the vera.
Okay.
If the majority would sin, then they would. Yeah. So now. Okay. So now. Okay. So now let's see what this is talking about. So B'mai, what exactly is the case of this brisa? So let's go through the options. We're going to have two ways a person is going to do a sin inadvertently, either on his own or because the court ruled. Now, the brisa start off saying that if a minority of the congregation sins, so then they have to bring an offering because the court doesn't bring one for them. If a majority sins, so then they don't because the court does bring one for them. And then it tells you something about minority majority that you have to bring. So now, if we're talking about Ilema Beshigas Maisa, a person does his own Aveira, so then why is the Brisa mentioning Bezdin? If a person does his own inadvertent sin, so then go bring an offering. What does Bezdin have to do with anything? Bezdin, my vidatayu. What are they doing in this Brisa? What would you say? Bezdin, my vidatayu. Shaloba haraz Bezdin, Bezdin mimaisu. If the court never ruled that this is permitted and you went and you did it anyways, so then the Bezdin should bring an offering. What do they have to do with you? So Ella behora. Okay. So rather, we're talking about clearly when Bezdin did a rule, they did a rule, and now it depends. If a minority followed their ruling, the minority has to bring an offering because the Bezdin doesn't cover their doesn't bring an offering for them. If the majority rules, so then if the majority follows the ruling, so then they don't have to bring an offering because the court is going to bring one for them. Okay, so that was the first part of the brisa. The problem is the end of the brisa talked about some situation where you're obligated. It says v'hakiksiv me'am ha'aretz. What does it mean when it said me'am ha'aretz, a people of the land? Sounds like people are obligated no matter what, whether they're a minority or a majority. It doesn't matter. They always bring an offering. That we're saying is b'shigas ma'asehu. That's talking about where you yourself did something inadvertent, nothing to do with the Bezdin, and therefore you have to bring an offering, whether it's the majority or the minority. It wasn't related to the court's ruling. Okay. Okay, fine. Now, says the Gemara, okay. So kiksiv ma'amar, it's b'shigas ma'aser tiksiv. So ela lab hachi kamar. Is this not how you read the brisa? Miut kal shechatu b'shigas ma'aser chayaven. So now a minority of the congregation who sin on their own, so they are chayav to bring a sacrifice. Why? She'ein bezdin mevin alidein par behora. That bezdin is not obligated to bring any sacrifice for their own individual aveiros. So, but ha hein chayavin, but they themselves are obligated. But they themselves are obligated. Yachol rov tzibur she'asu b'shigas ma'aseh pturin. Maybe you'll say that when the majority of the Jewish people commit a sin inadvertently on their own, that maybe they should bring a sacrifice. They should be exempt from a sacrifice because the court should bring one for them. Since when Bezdin issues a ruling and the majority follow them, so then they do bring an offering. Maybe an interesting thing, maybe you would have thought that even when Bezdin did not issue a ruling, but the majority still violated the law, they would also have to bring an offering. Talmud Lomar, no. That even the Torah tells us that no, if you do your own Aveira, even if the majority of you committed the same Aveira on your own, then you yourself have to bring a sacrifice, and the court will not bring one for you. So, fine. So that's the way you read the brisa. At the end of the day, a person. So once again, we're going. This brisa was reflecting the opinion of the Chachamim, who held that someone who follows the court's ruling is going to be exempt, is going to be liable. So here we see if they follow the court's ruling, so then they are going to be liable. They are going to be liable. If the majority follows the court's ruling, then the court is liable. But if the minority follows, then they are liable to bring their own sacrifice. Not like Rabbi Huda, who says if you follow the court's ruling, then you're going to be exempt. Yeah. Okay. So now Rav Papa is going to argue. Amar Rav Papa mimai. Who says that when a minority of the, who says that when the court issues a ruling and the minority follow them, that the minority has to bring a sacrifice? Maybe nobody has to bring a sacrifice. Amar Papa mimai dilma lohain v'lo bezdin. Nobody has to bring a sacrifice, and that's all it's saying. That by a minority of Jews that do an aveira inadvertently, nobody brings even when Bezdin rules, nobody brings a offering. Okay, so now a little bit technical, is that the setup of the brisa was, that first it mentioned a minority of the congregation that sinned, and then it said that they're liable for an offering. And then it went to a majority, and it said that the majority of people are exempt from an offering. So when we read the brisa, the way the first opinion tried to read the brisa was talking about a minority that does an avera on their own. So then then they have to bring a sacrifice because the court doesn't bring one for them. But if the court, if if there was a case of a ruling, so then they would be obligated. Yeah. So now he's saying, who says that? Maybe when the court ruled, no one's liable to bring. If the court ruled erroneously, not the people, not the court, no one is obligated to bring anything, and therefore that would be against the chachamim. So that was Rav Papa's suggestion. To that we say, it sounds like the Bryce is trying to find a case that when the majority of Jews sinned, really they should be liable. Why would you have thought they should be liable? Obviously, we're talking about a liability in the beginning. Lav mechlal demiyut behora, kaimale demechayvu behora. So obviously, until now, we're assuming that if a minority sins, according to the ruling of Bezdin, they're going to be liable. To that, it's a natural progression in the Brisa that when a majority sins, according to the ruling of the court, they should also be liable. So that makes sense. But in the Hadar Bereisha al Miut, the Mechayev Beshigas Maisa, Ula Besof Nehadar al Ruba Lechiyuva Beshigas Maisa. So does that make sense? Let's say we're not talking about the ruling of Bezdin. We're just talking about a person doing his own inadvertent avera. Does it make sense that we go from sorry, in the beginning, the Brisa mentioned that if you do your own avera, then you're going to be liable. But if Bezdin would have ruled, you'd be liable. And Bezdin is going to be exempt from bringing a sacrifice. And then we talk about when the majority of Jews do an avera. So based off the Bezdin's rule, based on their own ruling, they're going to be liable. But if it's based off the court's ruling, then they're going to be chayiv. Elalav midelo mahadar al miut the mechayven b'shigas ma'isa u besof mahadar al ruba lechiyuva b'shigas ma'isa shma mina that miut behora chayavin hein kizba usiira v'shaloi behoras b'shigas ma'isa v'shalo behoras b'shigas ma'isa chayavin. Okay, so I think it's a little bit nitty gritty, but I think he's just proving his point. He's proving his point that there's some case where the minority of the court, the minority of the Jewish people that follow the court's ruling, are going to be chayiv, and to that it told us that when it comes to the majority, they're only obligated if they themselves did an avera on their own. But if they would follow the majority, if the beginning case was a minority that commits a minority of Jewish people that commits a avera on their own is going to be liable. They're going to be liable for their own sacrifice, because the court does not bring a sacrifice on their behalf. So, ha'hein chayavin would mean that if the court would rule and a minority would follow their erroneous ruling, the minority would still be liable because the Bezdin doesn't bring a sacrifice on their behalf. To that, we naturally progress to the end of the Brisa, which said that if a majority followed the court's ruling, so then you would have thought they should be liable, just like the minority, to which we said that they're going to be exempt because the Bezdin brings an offering on their behalf. I think that's all that it's trying to say. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay, fine. So now, after that, we have two brises now. The first brisa told us that Rabbi Yehuda says you are exempt for following the court's erroneous ruling. If you follow them, you're going to be exempt. That's our Mishnah. And this brisa told us that if a minority would follow the court's ruling, so then they're going to be liable. That is not like our Mishnah. Now, what's the problem? Is that both of these brises are anonymous. So how do you know one's Rabbi Yehuda, one's the rabbis? They're both anonymous. So that's what the Gemara is going to ask now. Michti, Travayu, Stamei Tnan. Both of them are anonymous brises. So, Mimai de Kamaisa Rabbi Yehuda, how do you know that the first one is Rabbi Yehuda, and the next one is the Rabbanan, and the next brisa is the Rabbanan? Ema Ipcha, say the opposite. So the first brisa said that there are three exclusions from that verse. Im Nefesh Achas Techte. Nefesh, Achas, and Techte were all coming to teach us something. So and we said that was Rabbi Yehuda. How do you know that? Man Shamas the Darish Mutek Yihai Gavna Rabbi Yehuda. Who learns three exclusions from that verse? That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. How do I know? Another brisa that states explicitly Rabbi Yehuda's name, the Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Next page, Zos Torah Sa'ola, He Hare'elu Shloshim Yutim. We have another verse which also learns three exclusions. So we can assume that the other brisa, which also has those three exclusions, reflects the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. That's one answer. Another answer, Vibais Ema Dainani Omer, Lo Matzas Mukmas Lak Rabbi Yehuda. Now we're going to go process of elimination. The second brisa cannot be the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Why not? The Katani Rov Kal Shechatu, Bezdin Mevin Aidain Par. It said if the majority of the Jewish people follow the erroneous ruling of the court, so then the court is going to bring a bull to atone for everybody. Now, if that's Rabbi Yehuda, you're Rabbi Yehuda. Ha'amar Tzibur Huda Maisi, Bezdin Lo. Rabbi Yehuda says in that case, the congregation brings an offering, not the court. How do I know that? Coming up later. The Tanan, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Shiva Shvatim Shechatu. So you have 7 tribes that sinned, and we're assuming that the 7 tribes comprise the majority of the Jewish people. So what happens? Who brings an offering? They bring the offering. Maybe in Sheva Parim. They have to bring 7 bulls. So we see from the Mishnah that when the majority of the Jewish people follow an erroneous ruling of the court, they themselves have to bring the offering and not Bezdin. The Brisa said the opposite, that the court brings an offering and not the people. So obviously it can't be Rabbi Yehuda, it must be the Chachamim. So after all the dust settles, when the court issues an erroneous ruling and the minority of the Jewish people follow that ruling, so then according to Rabbi Yehuda, they're going to be exempt, and according to the Chachamim, they're going to be liable. And our Mishnah reflects Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. That was all the opinion. Whose opinion was that? That was the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, that our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. But Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, so both in the name of Shmuel, he says that Zu Divrei Rav Meir, the opinion that our Mishnah, when our Mishnah says that one is liable, one is exempt from following the court ruling, so that is the opinion of Rav Meir. Abal Chachamim Omer, the rabbis say, Yachid Sh'asa Baraz Bezdin Chai. If one person does something based off an erroneous ruling of the court, he will be liable. Rav Meir says you're exempt. Who's Rav Meir? Which Rav Meir? Where's Rav Meir? My Rav Meir or my Rabbanan? Same thing. Which Rav Meir? Which Rabbanan? The Tanya. Horu v'asu. If Bezdin ruled, the asu. Now, and they did. Who's that? 2 options. The court followed their own ruling, or the people followed the court's ruling. Horu is they issued a ruling, that's clear. The asu, and they did. Who's they? So, Rabbi Meir Poter. Rabbi Meir Poter. He says exempt. They're exempt. Chachamim mechayvim. Chachamim obligate. So now, says the Gemara, hold on, back up. Man asu. Who is the asu? So now, Elam a Bezdin. Let's say Bezdin ruled, the court ruled, and the court followed their own ruling. And there you have a debate. Rabbi Meir says the court themselves are exempt, and the rabbis say that they're obligated. So if you're going to tell me that the court is the one who followed their own ruling, so my time at the Rabbanan, why would the rabbi say that My time at the Rabbanon, the Mechayvi. Why would the rabbis be obligated? What does that mean? Let's see. You would have thought that if the court rules and the court violates their own rulings, the court ruled this piece of fat is permitted, and then they went it and they ate it for Shabbos dinner. So you would have thought those people, the court, should be obligated. Talmud Lomar, no. Hakal va'asu. It's only the nation that did. Ma'aset toli b'kal. Ma'aset toli b'kal v'hara toli b'bezdin. The action that we're liable for bringing an offering on an erroneous ruling is dependent on the people following them, not the court following them. Interesting thing. The court rules erroneously. We eat that according to Chanan, we're going to be exempt. If the court themselves does it, then they're going to be then reliable. If the court does it, then the court's going to be exempt. So it can't be that the Chachamim are going to obligate the court themselves for following their own erroneous ruling. That can't be. Ella, what are you going to say? Horu bezdin va'asu rov kal. Court issued a ruling. Most of the Jewish people follow that erroneous ruling. If that's true, why does Reb Meir exempt the people from bringing an offering? My time Reb Meir the poter. Why should he exempt them? Elalav, it must be like this. Horu bezdin, bezdin va. My time Reb Meir the poter probably means. Yeah. Why are they obligated to bring why they exempt? They should be obligated. So what must be the case? The case must be Elalav Horu bezdin. The court issued an erroneous ruling. The asu miut kal. And only a minority of the people violated the erroneous ruling. And there's a debate. Mar Savar, one opinion, who was the opinion of Rav Meir, Yachach Baraz Bezdin Potter. That's Rav Meir, that's our Mishnah. If an individual follows the ruling, then it's exempt. Umar Savar, Yachach Baraz Bezdin Tayiv. Another opinion says that if an individual follows the erroneous ruling of the court, he's going to be liable. So our Mishnah reflects the opinion of Rav Meir according to Rabbi Yehuda and according to Rav Nachman in the name of Shmuel. Our Mishnah is Rav Meir. Okay. This piece of fat permitted.
Yeah, and they follow their own ruling. They're not liable.
Why? What's the general rule? If you do
Majority. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, well, okay, I'm wrong. Sorry. The general rule is if you do something inadvertently that you're liable occurs for, then you bring an offering. There's an exception to the rule that when you follow the court's ruling, then you're going to be exempt. That it goes even for.
We're saying here if it's an individual that follows the court,
then it's machlokas. Yeah. But yeah, if the court themselves follows their ruling, then they're going to be exempt also. Yeah, it's interesting.
But then you bring a korban for the people, right?
If the majority of the people, yeah, I think that we'll see more about it in the next Mishnah that's coming up. I think. It is interesting. Okay. So now, Amar Papa says Papa, Kuli Am Yakach Baraz Bezdin Potter. Says no. You misunderstood the debate over here. Everybody agrees that if one person Sha'asa Behoyraz Bezdin Potter who acts on the erroneous ruling of the court, so Potter. Everyone agrees they're going to be exempt, like our Mishnah. Ella, the question's like this: Bezdin Mashin Lerov Tibur Kamiflagi. If you have a number of people that followed the erroneous ruling of the court, but they do not equal the majority of the Jewish people. But if you count the court, then you've tipped the scales. Now you do have a majority of the people following that. That's the debate. Can the Bezdin complete to now tip the scales that we view it as the majority has acted upon the erroneous ruling of Bezdin? Ella Bezdin Mashin Lerov Tzibur Kamiflagi. Mar Savar Bezdin Mashin Lerov Tzibur. So one opinion holds that the Bezdin does complete the numbers, and therefore the people are going to be exempt because I think Bezdin is going to bring an offering for them, I believe. Yeah. Umar Savar ain't Bezdin Mashin Lerov Tzibur. Bezdin does not complete the numbers, and therefore the individual is going to bring the offering. Yeah. So do you consider, when you look at the majority of Jewish people, do you include the court or not include the court? Difference going to be who brings the sacrifice. If you include the court and now the majority have sinned, so then the court has to bring. But if you don't include them, so then only the minority of the Jewish people have committed this avera, and the individuals are going to have to bring a sacrifice. Are going to be exempt from bringing a sacrifice, like our Mishnah. Yeah. Okay. So now, right, if Bezdin completes it, then the people are exempt. If Bezdin doesn't complete it, then the people are obligated. Yeah. V'bais ema, or another potential, another possibility. Horu Bezdin, the Asu Ruba Shalkal. Bezdin issued a ruling. Majority of the Jewish people followed that ruling, and therefore, yeah. Now, Uman Chachamim, the Chachamim, before we said there's a Chachamim that say that you're liable. Who is the Chachamim? Who's liable? Rabbi Shimon. What does Rabbi Shimon hold? The Amar Tzibur Maisi, who Bezdin Maisi. We're going to see later on. Rabbi Shimon says that really both parties are obligated. So if Bezdin rules and the majority of the Jewish people follow that ruling, Rabbi Shimon says everyone brings a sacrifice. Bezdin brings a sacrifice and the people bring a sacrifice. So maybe that's what we're talking about. Maybe another answer. Shavit Asabaraz Bezdin, a tribe followed the ruling of Bezdin, and now this Chachamim said you're liable. Who's Chachamim? Man Chachamim, Rabbi Yehuda. It's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Which Rabbi Yehuda? The Tanya. Shavit Asabaraz Bezdino, also a Shavit Chayev. A Shavit, a tribe that followed the erroneous ruling of Bezdin. That tribe, that whole tribe is liable in offering. So there's a difference if a person does it. It's a difference if a whole tribe follows, or if the majority of the Jewish people follow. So each one's going to have their own rule. The Ibai same another answer. Shisha. Let's say 6 tribes followed the erroneous ruling of the court. Vehain Rubo Shalkal. These 6 tribes they make up the majority. Or Shiva, 7 tribes. Afal Pisha Ain Ruba Shalkal. Or maybe it's 7 tribes that do not make up the majority of the Jewish people. They're still going to be obligated in bringing a sacrifice. And then, if that would be true, and then who would our Mishnah be like? Umasnis and money, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Our Mishnah would be the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, who says, Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Mishmo. He says it sounds like in Elazar's name and his father's name. Chatu Shisha, 6 tribes did an Avera, Vehain Ruba Shalkal. And they are the majority of the Jewish people. Or Shiva, 7 tribes did. Afal Pisha Ein Aruba Shalkal Chayavim. They are obligated to bring their own sacrifice. Even 7 who are not the majority, the tribes have to bring their own sacrifices. Majority of the tribes. Right. Yes, exactly. Right. So everyone says the majority. The question is how you calculate the majority. Yeah. Okay. That's right. Yeah. You got to be a math major to be on the Sanhedrin, yeah. So okay. Amar Ravasi. Okay, Ravasi says Behoras. So now, Behorah halach achar harov Yoshua Eretz Yisrael. Interesting. You look at the Jewish people. You zone in on the land of Israel, and you do not exclude any of us. That is the majority. How do I know? Shneimar, maybe you can tell me. I wasn't able to figure out. I don't think I was able to. It says Shlomo when he's talking about the inauguration of the temple. V'yah Shlomo be'esahi es hachag the Kol Yisrael imu. Yeah, no, sorry. We're gonna say that. Yeah, Kal Gadol. So there's all the Jewish people, a great congregation. They came from where? Mi Hamas ad Nachal Mitzrayim, not the terrorists, but the area of Hamas ad Nachal Mitzrayim until the valley of Mitzrayim. Lifnei Hashem Elokeinu Shivas Yamim. Shivas Yamim, Arba Asar Yom. They came 7 days and 7 days, for 14 days they came. Okay, so now where do you see from here that the majority of the Jewish people are calculated after the residents of Israel? Yisrael Imo Kal Gadol, all the Jewish people, the congregation. And then what does it say? Who is that? The ones that came, Milavo Hamas, Anakam Mitzrayim, Lamali. Who? And then so what's it coming to include? All the Jewish people, a great congregation, that came from here to there. What do you need that for? Shema mina, that only these people, meaning the ones that came from this part of Israel to that part of Israel, from Israel, are the ones that are called a kahal, a congregation. Everyone else is not considered a kahal, is not considered a congregation, and therefore you go after the majority of people in Eretz Yisrael. Yeah. Okay. Shita. Okay, so now we're gonna have a lot of questions back to back to back to back to back. Okay, Shita. What happens, Jared? You like this? Merubin v'nismatu. You had a majority at the time of the ruling of the erroneous ruling. There was a majority of the Jewish people, and now nismatu. Now, unfortunately, people died, and now there are less people. Or the opposite?
A lot of babies born.
We'll see that in a second. That's coming up next. Yeah. Pshita, merubin v'nismatu. A lot of people and then less people. So, hainu plukta Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan. That's going to be a machlokas, Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan coming up on Daf Yud. They're going to argue by let's say a nasi, a ruler who issues a ruling. So now, okay, we'll see. So that's going to be a machlokas, Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. What about the opposite? Muatin v'nisrabu mai. You had at the time of a ruling only a minority of the Jews follow the ruling, and then v'nisrabu, and then they increased. So, yeah. So what happens in that case? So Rashi explains a little bit that. So let's just get the details. Bezdin rules erroneously. Okay, fine. Now a minority of the Jewish people followed their ruling, and we're assuming now that you should be exempt for that. And then what happened? A part of them, after we increased, it was known to them their avera. It was known to them their avera. So how do you deal with that? Now when they find out that they did something wrong, so now you have many more Jews or many less Jews. And then, so at the time you had one number when they acted upon it. When it's known to them what they did wrong, that's going to be, do you go after the knowledge or after when they actually committed the avera? So me pligi, is there really a machlokas, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbanan, also in that case, or no? Meaning the Gemara understands for sure there's a debate when you have a minority of people that followed the erroneous ruling, and then what happened? And then some of them died, and then they found out about their avera. So now that's a machlokas. But when you go the other way, that's our question. One second. Yeah. What's the difference in the two cases? In the first case, when you have a minority of the Jewish people that follow the erroneous ruling, right now they're exempt from an offering. Now, later on, when you find out about what they did wrong, so now the numbers have increased. Well, one second, let's do the first case. You have a lot of people that committed the error. They are a majority of the Jewish people. They are liable to bring an offering. So, and now they've decreased. And now they find out what they did wrong. Minority do not bring an offering. So that's a machlokas Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. When you were originally exempt, obligated to bring an offering, are you still obligated or can you be exempt? But the other way is a little bit of a novelty, that you're really exempt the whole time from bringing an offering, right? You're really exempt. And now the fact that more babies were born, now you're going to be obligated. So that's why we have a question. Is that a machlokas Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan also? It's a much bigger novelty. To go from exempt to liable because babies were born is much bigger novelty than to go from liable to exempt. So, okay. So now me pligi Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan. Rabbi Shimon, the Azil Basar Yediyah, Rabbi Shimon goes after the knowledge. What are the numbers at the time that you find out you did something wrong? So Rabbi Shimon, Azil Basar Yediyah, Mechayev, he would hold your chayev, whatever is there at the time of the knowledge. Rabbanan, the Ozli Basar Chata Patri. The rabbis go after the time of the sin, and therefore, if the minority were there at the time of the sin, so then you're going to be then you're going to be exempt. So now Olo, or maybe not. Maybe this case is not a debate, Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. So now says the Gemara, what's the most logical approach? If it is Tizbra, it's most logical to say that a time is not. What time is it? What time is it exactly?
2.5 minutes.
2.5 minutes. Okay.
Ashkola.